Greetings and welcome to the United States Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. My name is Gennady Stoliarov II, and I am the chairman of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. Here we hold conversations with some of the world's leading thinkers in longevity, science, technology, philosophy, and politics. Like the philosophers of the Age of Enlightenment, we aim to connect every field of human endeavor and arrive at new insights to achieve longer lives, greater rationality, and the progress of our civilization. Greetings and welcome to our Virtual Enlightenment Salon of June 5th, 2022. We're pleased to bring you today a fascinating discussion on the health and legal implications of transhumanism. Joining us today is a distinguished panel of U.S. Transhumanist Party officers and members, including our Director of Visual Art, Art Ramon Garcia, our Legislative Director, Jason Geringer, our Director of Longevity Outreach, Ben Ballweg, our Technology Advisor and Foreign Ambassador in Spain, Dr. Jose Cordero, and our friend and ally, a frequent guest on our Virtual Enlightenment Salons, Didier Carnel, who joins us from Belgium, and our special guest today, joining us from Paris, France, is Makiko Yoshioka. Makiko is a master's degree student at Paris 8 University, specializing in health law with a focus on digital and AI systems. Today, she will actually give two presentations. She will provide an overview of her research in her areas of specialization and discuss potential future directions for that research. So welcome, Makiko. Please go ahead. And I believe you need to unmute.
Sorry. Hello, my name is Makiko Yoshioka. As presented, I am from Japan. Now I'm living in Strasbourg, in France. Firstly, let me introduce about the impact of transhumanism on reproductive health treatment. It is about fertilization of women and their babies. Let me introduce myself again. So I live in Strasbourg for 10 years. I'm fluent in French, Italian, English, and I'm native of Japanese. I studied in Waseda University in Japan. Then I'm finishing my master's degree in University of Paris 8. First year, I was focusing on the studying of law of health, basically. So about patient rights, medical responsibility, and bioethics. My dissertation was personalized medicine in terms of oncology. With this, I could learn many about personalized medicine and its legal problems. And this year, second year, as I specialized in digital and AI, I wrote about, in French, I said la naissance des enfants connectés, which means all sorts of fertilization until birth of babies, but which uses the technologies, especially digital and AI. So I found this topic was concerned to a lot of things to transhumanism as well. This is why I chose this topic to preparation for a PhD thesis too. So this first presentation is about this topic. So first of all, I explain to you why I direct to do the comparison between Japan and France, especially about European Unions. Why transhumanism on health in Japan? it's disappointing, but actually transhumanism in Japan is not so common. When I talk about transhumanism to Japanese friends in Japan, they avoid to talk about it. They try to change the subject because they don't know what it is exactly. But I'm very interested in choosing this topic compared to France and the European countries because in Japan, aging society is serious. There are many elderly people who live over 100 years. And especially, there are not many young people. So they need work laborers, but they don't want to rely on immigration labor power, especially from Asian countries, because of the politics. So they choose to have robotic healthcare staffs, like robotics who cares elderly people who are wandering around at night. They survive with biometric surveillance. This is the most interesting example in Japan. And I think they will use more medical devices like EOT and EOB because there are no young people. And secondly, the low birth rate is remarkable in Japan. So intervention by biotechnology and digital technology in times of reproductive healthcare is very important. So the pre-implantation diagnostic connected to AI contributes to confirm the young people who wish to have safely the babies without problem. So we can say a perfect baby. Or the studies about artificial wombs had already begun 20 years ago in Japan. So even the people don't know about transhumanism exactly. In the field of science, they have advanced. And the idea of longevity is not far from realization because Shinya Yamanaka, who is very popular and famous in Japan, has participated in Altos Labs. Maybe you know about them, about longevity, and he contributes a lot. So maybe it will be near future that Japanese people will know about this activity too. And cancer is said to be inevitable for half of Japanese population. Half of Japanese become cancer. So personalized medicine is very advanced also in Japan. And this is very interesting too, because we have a culture of anime and video games, which can very easily accept the arrival of a metaverse. This is why I chose Japan as my research of transhumanism. And now I explain quickly about France because I have studied about it for 1 year. During and after COVID-19, the digitalization of healthcare has accelerated in France and in Europe. So they are very close to the share of health data, and they hear about it much more than in Japan. And the relation between America about health data is very getting closer too. So this is very important because European countries are also in advance about researches. And as like in Japan, here in France, the aging population, aging society is progressing as well. So they will need absolutely the transhuman technology which can facilitate the transhumanism in Europe too. So first title of my project is about realization of transhumanism in reproductive health treatment. So I talk about two legal problems in case of realization of transhumanism in reproductive health treatment. First one is about human rights of the patients. For example, treatment of reproduction of longevity, is it accessible for everyone? For example, in Japan, until this spring, most of I forgot the English name. Maybe detail. Most of dependencies which we need to pay wasn't reimbursed by Social Security. So we need to make money like a price of an apartment to have a baby. So already it was an inequality for treatment of fertilization. So if we can have the technology of AI that facilitates this treatment, these differences will be bigger. And aging population needs people who want to have right to have babies. In French, we say that too, but right to have a baby is not a right which is written in law, but it's desire to have babies. And it's increasing actually in France since the marriage between homosexuality had been admitted. So people think that AI-connected reproductive health treatment should be accessible to everyone. So this is one of the, we say, problem in the society, which is coming. And artificial wombs provokes inequality, maybe between the babies who will be born from human mother and machine. And maybe the advanced technology using AI in the pre-implantation diagnostic will provoke eugenics again, because they think that it is normal to want to have a baby, the perfect baby, because we can control with them. So it's necessary to analyze very frequently about international works and maybe the level of national too. Second one is about women's rights under transhumanism in the fertilization and birth of children. Because women's rights in the fertilization must be respected, especially about abortion. And in the United States, we have had a big news about it, that maybe the country will ban this right absolutely in all over the country. So this is the dilemma between the development of biotechnology, of prenatal testing to find abnormality of fetus easily, and if we can protect the women's right to have her baby. To be able to choose if she wants to continue her pregnancy or not. So this was about in United States, but share of health data of women concerning pregnancy reveals also the commit of abortion because of it's connected to AI. So this concerns about rights to privacy of women's rights. And arrival of artificial wombs again, it's considered as liberation of women because elimination of pregnancy is also the elimination of system of surrogate mother, like we see in Ukraine. But at the same time, the ethic program about treatment infertility, because baby who will be born from the machine will be in obscurity because they will not have a physical contact between baby and mother for 10 months. So we cannot foresee which kind of damages will happen to the babies and to mothers. So secondly, I'd like to specify more in legal problems in transhumanism in fertilization. This is about, it's not only about fertilization, but also it's very important. It's about personal health data, which is going to be shared maybe in near future in European Union because they are quickly changing the situation. And legal framework for protection of donors of gametes is very different. I saw this between Japan and France. France regulates very strictly about the protection of donors, but in Japan there is no law who controls about it. So there are people who exchange gametes via SMS. Just they meet and they make baby to have a baby. So legal framework should be more controlled because the personal data via SMS can be easily escaped. So so as I told you, the European health data space is now going to arrive. They have talked about it about 1 month ago in Europe. So we have to, personally, I'd like to see how develop the general data regulation protection. This is about personal health data in Europe, and which is very strict about share of health data in Europe. So in Japan too, they are a little bit in retard, but they are going to improve also the system of interoperability of data. But actually, the regulation, it's about privacy data system, but it doesn't distinguish the difference between health data and personal data in general. This is a big difference between Europe too. So lastly, I talk about medical accountability in the contract of transhumanism in fertilization. This is really about future. In case there will be on artificial wombs, if there is an accident during 10 months in the machine, who takes the decision to interrupt this pregnancy And who will be the responsible about this consequence? This is what I tried to work during my PhD. And maybe new forms of contract about this situation will be born. I will think and I will analyze about it too. So AI regulate the rules about the utilization of AI is very important too. And Japan is also unfortunately in retard about this utilization of AI too. So we have to, I have to have a look about it too. So my first presentation was until this. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Makiko. This is a fascinating set of subjects to discuss, certainly. And I have several questions for you, and we'll also have the opportunity to ask a few questions about your first presentation before we launch into your second presentation. My first question for you is a more general question about the reception of transhumanism in Japan, because you mentioned all of these factors, the demographic factors, the technological factors, even the fact that Shinya Yamanaka is famous and well respected in Japan. And yet, you also pointed out that many Japanese people like to change the subject when transhumanism is mentioned. Our friend Sergei Gubkin writes that maybe this is a better situation than in the West, because at least they don't begin to argue with you when you talk about transhumanism. They just change the subject. But still, it seems a bit unusual that Japan has these technological prerequisites and certainly the need for a framework like transhumanism to emerge. And yet many Japanese people are reluctant to think about it or explicitly embrace transhumanism. So why do you think that is? Why do you think this tension exists in Japanese society?
Against transhumanism.
Yes, so even though Japanese people in practice are applying a lot of the technologies that comprise transhumanism, in terms of their philosophy or even their willingness to talk about it, they seem to be more reserved. So why do you think that's the case?
About my thesis, I have to find a Japanese professor which can be co-director, and I contacted some of my friends who are researcher in Japan. And when I say about my topic, they say maybe you have to change your subject of your thesis if you want to find a professor in Japan. And I had an opportunity to talk with a sociologist,
Sociologist, yes.
Who wrote about transhumanism in Japan. I asked him to give me some researches that he was doing. He said to me that maybe about law that there is nothing. I can find nothing about it in Japanese. Maybe some research centers like RIKEN, which also researches about enhancement. Maybe some of the centers I can find some documents. This is what he told me. And he didn't explain to me why Japanese don't want to talk about it. So I'm wondering also that why, because Japanese people, I was very surprised when I went back to Japan to see in the convenience store, which is open for 24 hours, the robot tells you welcome, and the people accept it. And my uncle, who is in the care center in Japan, he is brought to the bathroom by robot who doesn't speak. So I don't know. They are very happy to accept this situation, which is artificial, but they don't want to talk about maybe we can benefits of this new technology to become better like human. Because I'm not transhumanist, but I don't see the difference between the robots who can enter in your house, who can take care of your parents, but you don't want to enhance yourself. So maybe this is not a clear answer, but this is what I have to know for 4 hours too, for 4 years too, during my PhD.
Yes. Thank you for that answer, Makiko. And indeed, it's a very interesting situation because I wish we had those kinds of caretaker robots in Western countries. Certainly in the United States, they would be quite helpful. And we have a lot more discussion of transhumanism in the West. But in some respects, in terms of practical transhumanism, Japan is ahead of the West, in particular in the area of robotics, but also one could make the argument in the area of longevity, at least practical longevity. Japan has one of the highest, if not the highest, life expectancies in the world. Perhaps some small countries
Yes.
like Monaco and Liechtenstein may have higher life expectancies, but that's a very self-selecting group of people who live at a very high material level. But Japan is quite a large country, and Japanese people, on the whole, seem to practice healthier living, and they have a good quality of healthcare, and they utilize technology in their healthcare system quite well. So I see all of the foundations, all of the prerequisites for a transhumanist society, an explicitly transhumanist society. It's just that there has to be this cultural recognition and perhaps more academics in Japan studying transhumanism. So this is a contribution that you're making that I think can help to bridge this divide, because we have to start somewhere. And if you're doing this kind of research and connecting with people in Japan, perhaps others will also pick up these subject areas because they're quite underutilized, understudied in Japan right now. Now, our friend John H., with regard to Sergei Gubkin's previous comment, says, argument is better, at least words are being exchanged on the topic, even if hostile words. So he thinks any discussion of transhumanism in the public sphere, even if some people disagree with it or oppose it, would constitute progress. So maybe if in a few years you start hearing some Japanese people critiquing transhumanism or arguing against it, it might actually be a sign that you are getting somewhere in terms of awareness of the subject or people discussing it. And John also says he thinks Japan is still #1 in terms of lifespan. I would be interested in seeing the life expectancy statistics from 2020 and 2021, especially in light of the COVID pandemic, but that's a subject that we can visit later. I have a question for you on artificial wombs and the treatment of abortion in the era of artificial wombs. One of the policy planks of the US Transhumanist Party platform is in support of artificial wombs because they can resolve the dilemma of rights that currently exists with regard to abortion. So on the one hand, there is the right to life of the unborn child. On the other hand, there is the right of choice of the woman to be pregnant or not to be pregnant. And those two rights currently are not easily reconcilable because the termination of the pregnancy involves the death of the unborn child. However, if artificial wombs exist, then it may be possible to not kill, but evict the unborn child into an artificial womb. And as a result, you preserve the right to life, but you allow the woman, if she wishes to terminate her pregnancy, to not go on with it. And then the woman may not need to be responsible for the continued upkeep of the child if there's a policy where, in those situations, an artificial womb is used and the child becomes essentially a ward of the state. So the government would provide the resources for that creation of life to be completed, and then provide financial support for a child in that situation. And you raised the ethical question of what would happen in those situations where there is a quote pregnancy via an artificial womb, but someone doesn't want to continue it. So there would be some sort of government fund, some sort of policy where
Mm-hmm.
any conception within an artificial womb that is started is brought to completion, and then there's some support provided for that child to reach maturity and grow up and become independent and have some sort of support system. So what do you think of that as the transhumanist solution to the issue of abortion and the types of dilemmas that are currently found in pregnancy? I think it could be made to work if enough financial and societal support are provided. But what are your thoughts on that kind of outcome?
That is a very interesting question, and I didn't have this point of view, so I'm running from you. Maybe I was very I am very afraid of arrival of artificial worms, actually, because I cannot imagine that my daughter will bring a baby from a machine. She tells me to go to hospital because the baby will be born. That will be fine because the 37 weeks have passed. So after this thought, I couldn't go out from the imagination. How will be the solution when it will be really arriving in the society? So maybe what you have told to me must be, maybe I didn't understand all, but what was the financial support for which program? Could you
So
tell me?
the financial support would exist in a situation where a woman would want to have an abortion. So
Mm-hmm.
instead of the abortion killing the fetus would be transferred to an artificial womb and essentially
Okay.
sustained until it's ready to be born, so to speak. And
Mm-hmm.
then there would be financial support for essentially upbringing, education. There would be schools, there would be some sort of stipend paid for that individual. And today, of course, there exist orphanages which are woefully underfunded. But in a future society, a transhumanist society, we would have more
Mm-hmm.
resources. We would have more material abundance. So presumably there would be a higher standard of living that could be provided, and tools like artificial intelligence also used to help with educating these children and making sure that they grow up and are supported until they're ready to become financially independent.
Okay. So those children will become orphan from the birth
Yes,
because, yeah, but they can avoid to be dead before because of abortion.
yes. So instead of abortion killing them, they would be born. And another alternative could be an adoption. So there could be, for instance, parents, people who want to be parents, but haven't conceived their own children or don't want to for whatever reason. But there could be essentially a program where they could make a choice if the biological mother wants to have an abortion to then take care of that child while that child is being incubated in the artificial womb, and ultimately adopt that child and become the legal parents.
Okay, that is very interesting point of view. I really had never imagined about it. And I wanted to know before finishing my master to to write my papers. So maybe I will add this point of view in my project because it's very interesting, and the right of women will be reinforced because of this.
Yes, and as a point of reference, we do have a section in our platform, which is section 84, which reads as follows. The United States Transhumanist Party supports research into the process of ectogenesis, the ability of organisms to be incubated and to grow to the point of independent survival within an artificial environment that provides such organisms with all the necessities of biological survival and development. Furthermore, the United States Transhumanist Party supports the widespread deployment and use of the technology of ectogenesis once such technology becomes safe and practical. Ectogenesis has the potential to benefit humans and other species alike, restoring extinct species and bolstering the numbers of endangered species, as well as alleviating the burdens of human pregnancy and rendering the divisive debate over abortion obsolete by reconciling the right to life of a fetus with the freedom of a woman to choose not to carry that fetus. So that latter sentence is what I was talking about in terms of a future where abortion does not need to involve any sort of termination of a life. So I would encourage you in your further research on the subject to look at section 84 of the US Transhumanist Party platform, because I think this is the first political party that has explicitly addressed the subject of artificial wombs. And I think that's a subject that needs to be discussed to a greater extent because it can solve some problems that are currently, in my view, unsolvable. But I do want to go on to another question from Jason Geringer, and he is curious about why exactly Japan's birth rate is low. He has heard that most developed countries have a low birth rate, but in Japan it's particularly low. And how much of a problem is it? Do you think it is a problem? And if it is, to what extent is it a problem for Japanese society?
That there are not about low birth rate.
Yes.
I see already the situation in Japan. For example, when I go back there in the past, there are only elderly people. Really, there are no children. And in France, there are many children around here. Each family has 3, 4 children in family. So when I see that, firstly, I thought that the security in the society is not guaranteed, and then the financial problem to support those people who will live until 102, 3. Around me, there are many elderly people who live until that age. Um, the parents of my father died at 100 without any problem of health. So they naturally died. So I see them. I see really there are many problems when there are no children in the society. The people have become also very not patient with children too. So the young people don't want to have children in that society who doesn't accept the children. Then, yeah. But firstly, it's about financial problem like other countries. And secondly, there are many empty houses that could be connected to crime because there are no people in the village. and in the cities too. And some cities in Japan are trying to put biomedical devices in the city, like in China, in the name of protection of elderly people who have Alzheimer's. But they don't regulate that, but each city has right to put this kind of AI surveillance without consent of elderly people. So there are too many problems that I saw in Japanese society, that there are no many children. At the same time, the right of women is not so protected in Japan. At the work, in the level of politics too, women cannot participate to the society. But at the same time, they cannot have babies because of financial problem too, because the economy is not like before. China is much better than us, and we don't have a particular industry which is growing up, like in China. We don't have it. So, like Elon Musk said last month, I think, Elon Musk said that Japan will disappear because women's right is not protected and there are no children. There are only elderly people without money. So I thought that he's right. He was talking about Italy too. Maybe we have systematic common problems in the society. So it is difficult to define what is the most problem to have less children in the society. But I think the danger to lose this country is not a joke, I think.
Interesting. Well, thank you very much for that response, Makiko. And you emphasized the financial constraints that a lot of people face that lead them to essentially consider having children to be unaffordable. And for whatever reason, this is an increasing tendency across developed countries these days, not just limited to Japan, but certainly it is the case in Europe. It is the case increasingly in the United States. And a kind of paradoxical situation that you mentioned is that in China, where actually the average incomes are lower, the standard of living for most people is lower, people don't experience those kinds of constraints. So I'm curious as to why you think that is, that in Chinese society, you said these problems don't exist to the same extent, even though China had the one-child policy for a long time. And as a result, China's own population growth has not been as large as it could have been, but China in recent decades has moved away from the one-child policy. So what do you think is different in Chinese society as contrasted with Japanese society?
About Chinese society, I have many Chinese friends who are only one child. And I asked, the government allowed now to your generation to have several children. But how do you think about it as your generation of one child? They say that they think that they cannot afford to give good education for their children as they received at their time. And they think it's kind of egoism from government that people had to choose to the abortion because they couldn't have second, third children. And now they say to you that they give you money and you can have more children because there are too many elderly people. Actually, Chinese elderly people over 65 years old are more than Japanese total population. So maybe the scale is quite much more serious than in Japan because they cannot feed them and they cannot pay expensive for elderly people too. Maybe in Japan, elderly people, so the generation of my parents, were the rich generation too, who could contribute to put money in the government, and they are affording with those money, but not my generation because of bankruptcy of our economy. So, but China is now very rich. So maybe the generation of my age is not the same situation in China. I have never thought of, I didn't think that there are differences about this situation between China and Japan. But only one thing is that in China, the economy is growing up, and my country not.
So it may be more of the economic growth trajectory rather than the absolute levels of prosperity, but people in China may expect more growth to come, and they may think that their children will therefore have more opportunities. Very interesting. I would also like to thank Celeste Castaldo for her generous super chat. And she writes, it's so exciting to see all the work happening for life extension and maintaining youth these days. She has also read about great advancements the Japanese government and researchers are making in regenerative medicine, and in particular in stem cell therapy and tissue regeneration. So thank you for those observations, Celeste. And now, Makiko, I think it would be good to transition into your second presentation. So if you could begin to set that up, I will activate it as soon as it's available. And in the meantime, I wanted to also highlight this comment from Daniel Twett, who writes that he is optimistic that a future of flourishing abundance has the potential to solve problems we haven't even anticipated yet. And certainly some of the problems that have been discussed today are among those problems that I would hope could be solved by a future of sustainable superabundance. So now, go ahead, Jason.
The low birth rate could be fixed by longevity, I'm thinking. So.
Yes, absolutely. If people keep living, if they continue to be biologically young, if they continue to have the ability to be productive, then there is not nearly so much of a void left by an aging population or by people dying, since hopefully we will be able to achieve the death of death, as our friend Jose Cordero has written about. But now I would like to once again give the floor to Makiko for her presentation on the legal impact of transhumanism on health. Makiko, please proceed.
Thank you. This project is about academic project that I will talk about more general things about health in terms of transhumanism. So the revolution of transhumanism in terms of health, which can be, I have to learn more about which technology can contribute to realization of transhumanism, because it's not that I know all. So with this, maybe I can deepen my comprehension. So firstly, I'd like to talk about health issues in France and Japan. It's like first presentation, so I will quickly talk about it. It's about human rights in spite of transhumanism, under the situation of low birth rate provoking the aging society. So this is what we were talking about. What I was afraid in my dissertation of my master too, when pre-implantation diagnostic can be more precise, maybe the sort of the modification, genetic modification of babies before implantation, before choosing embryo will be maybe allowed in someday, because now, because of Convention of Oviedo, it's prohibited. But the development of utilization of AI in implantation diagnostic, pre-implantation diagnostic, maybe can lead the situation that those things that are considered taboo in this moment will be authorized someday. This is what I thought in this chapter. And secondly, it's not only pregnancy, but it's about cancer and neurodegenerative diseases, because there are many diseases in the world, but the cancer kills 10 millions of the people in 2020, according to WHO. So enhancement of people is very useful to solve this situation in oncology. So this is what I'm going to examine more, because I wrote about personalized the precision medicine of oncology in first year. And I saw some cases about neurodegenerative diseases require the improvement of quality of life thanks to those technology, like Elon Musk is trying to do. So I'm very interested in, because the protection of data is not like other health data, other personal health data, because it comes from brain directly. So I try to study about it more than now, because it will improve and it will progress more than now. And connected medical devices are, I think that they are creating more and more and more that I cannot count. So the legal frame cannot always be updated to control this situation. So I'd like to study about it more than now too. And secondly, medical utils serving transhumanism in France and in Japan. This is about personal health data. So I talked about it before too. Maybe there is nothing which is new, but I was surprised that Health.Hub in France, who wanted to make a big platform for personal health data in France, was failed politically, because they choose iCloud of Microsoft, even if the regulation prohibited, and the Court of Europe had prohibited it. If we use Microsoft Cloud, there's no meaning to control it. And before election of Emmanuel Macron, he decided to quit it, but temporarily, because he's waiting to be back. Because he wants to show that France can do it. But in waiting, last month, I saw this news about European health data space will be arriving. maybe soon. So this is the big changes for transhumanists too, because this kind of platform can contribute to the speed of improvement of devices and researches. Then legal engagement in the medical innovation is quite important. This is very legal. So, like I talked about artificial womb, the medical responsibility will be more complicated with robotics and AI and digitals and any other new things that will be arriving. So we cannot find always legal solution. Who is responsible? Who can prove it? What is the percentage of responsibility of the consequences? And this is very important to think that self-regulation of big companies like GAFAM or startups about their ethics is quite important. But while I studied about it, I saw that they do it, but they show it like a commercial, like a strategy to show that they are using many personal data. So they respect it, but they cannot say the real situation. And in Japan, a scientist, it was very interesting. A scientist proposed 3 rules of scientists like robotics of Asimov of many years ago. So he said that scientists have to respect the conservation of proofs and respect of others and freedom in the research. This was very important and very interesting and impressed. I was impressed. So, and finally, I'm very interested in the protection of neural rights, which was born in Chile. I thought Chile was right because they are very close to America. They are very close to ambition of GAFAM. So maybe they foresaw this situation, and it was the first country to create it. So I'd like to see how maybe Japan and France and European countries, how they will react in this situation. Then Title 2 is about the positioning of a human in the era of transhumanism. It's not only in France and in Japan, because when there will be humanoid robot and transhumanist and classic human like we are now, the percentage of responsibility or maybe inequality of capacity or capacity of decision will be so different, more than actual situation that we are only classic human. So this is what I'd like to study, but it's very hypothetical, and but maybe this Comité consultatif national d'éthique, it's organism in France about ethics. They say about neural enhancement because it provokes the already inequality between transhumanists and human. Because transhumanist, maybe it can be thought of luxurious medical solution. Who can afford it? It will take time to generalize that people who wants to become transhumanist can become, because it costs so a lot. So maybe with this we can foresee the situation inequality between transhumanist and human, classic human. Another example, this is what I already said about reimbursement for the fertilization and access to digital devices. For example, maybe elderly people need to have technology of transhumanist for longevity or for solving the situation of cancer, but they are very far from digitalization. What I saw in Japan last year is that when the government opened the reservation of vaccination of COVID-19, it was very paradoxical because they said for young people to come to City Hall to make a reservation. It's very manual, but for elderly people who had priority to have a vaccination more than 65 years old, they told them to make a reservation online. And as there are many families only of elderly people without children, they were lost in this system. So when it comes about transhumanism, how they can know how to control their personal health data, how they can control what they are seeing about of EOB, which they are putting. So this inequality is quite grave, I think. And this is really more imagination, but it will come because metaverse is used already for the formation of medicine students to learn in metaverse. And in case of realization of metaverse, transaction of monies, litigation between people, and cyber attacks in metaverse, we cannot imagine what will happen, but we need to imagine what will happen, and the registration must be done. This is the most difficult case, I imagine, compared to medical devices, because medical devices can be produced following the rules which are already established. But metaverse is only in the video game for children in this moment for the general people. So I think this is very important to analyze the legal problems in metaverse. Then, as I told you, firstly, in Japan, they love to accept robotics. And maybe robotics will be connected to transhumanism. This is what I expect in Japanese society, that people maybe will accept transhumanism in condition that it's connected with robotics. This is what I imagine for Japanese people. So decisional capacity of AI will be in the question too. And this is what I told before. A humanoid robot is coming from robot. So they are machine. But transhumanist and we, classical human, we are from human. But the capacity will be very different. And even between transhumanists, that will be very different because they don't choose the same thing. So that will be very important to do the legal reflection about it. So yes, as I wrote in the example, this is very interesting because enhanced doctor or doctor human using AI devices, which is more competent about their jobs and which decision must be respected. This is an example that I imagined. So I'm very excited about this topic for my 3 academic years. And the lastly, this is very general situation, but the legal framework concerning AI will develop, I think, because of all those I have told today. CCNE, the Committee of Ethics in France, already told that AI use must be accompanied by guaranteed human. But human will be full. This is also the question that I imagine. So, but it's only hypothetical, true. And European Commission is trying to catch up the situation of AI as rapidly as possible. So they published Artificial Intelligence Act. They don't want society like China. So they banned massive control of the population immediately in this act. So I'd like to study about it very deeply because it's connected to human rights. Yes. And this is very disappointing that Japan is, in despite of the first impression, we are very in late of AI technology. This is amazing, but this is the reality in Japan. So I will see, because the international society like America and the European countries, we improve in those systems of AI and transhumanism. So maybe they will be upset to catch up with them, because Japan is a society who has developed imitating Western countries. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much, Makiko, for your presentation. And you can see on Makiko's final slide her email address and her LinkedIn profile. So anybody who is interested in Makiko's research or in supporting it or in proposing further directions for that research or giving her source materials to study, please contact her, because her research is very much still in progress, and she would like any leads within the transhumanist community that could enable her to take that research further. So now we are going to have a lot of questions for you, Makiko, and some comments from our audience. So first of all, Jason mentions that you made a good point about legislation in the metaverse. Laws and policies always seem to be reactive to problems, and they arrive sometimes too late to effectively address a given problem, and we should start that discussion before it gets here. So thank you for that comment, Jason. And our friend Daniel Twet has a question about your reference to conservation of proofs. He's wondering if you were referring to a concept like Occam's razor, where one tries to find the simplest logically consistent explanation for a particular phenomenon, or are you referring to a different principle here with conservation of proofs?
I have details in French. So yeah. I try to explain it in English.
We got DDA here.
Yeah. So I can tell him, then he can translate. So conservation of proof, right? Les scientifiques doivent conserver les preuves de faits des sujets et des preuves. De sujets, résultats d'expériences et d'investigations. Et des preuves, échantillons et carnets de vérité, lois, règles, et d'idées pendant une certaine période. Le principe de conservation est que le scientifique doit conserver pendant un certain temps les preuves des faits en cause.
Yeah, just so to summarize very short, I think it's not about the same thing that the person was asking. It's really about conservation of proof in a scientific way. You have to conserve to keep information and proofs. So it's another thing, I think.
All right, thank you, Didier, for the translation. We appreciate that. And now I would like to highlight a discussion that occurred in our internal chat. Jason asked, can we really assume that inequality will get worse with more technology? Jason is not so sure about that. And Didier wrote, actually, it is the old question of either all people becoming enhanced or only a part. And he thinks the first way is more probable and better if all people are able to get access to enhancement, but he is not completely sure of which of these outcomes will transpire. Celeste Castaldo writes, some of us will do whatever it takes while others may choose not to. We all have the same access to choose what we want, regardless of external circumstances. And I think her point is, if somebody really wants a particular type of health enhancement or any other life improvement, that person will try to put in the effort or devote the resources, at least in terms of getting a large part of the way there. And perhaps it could be a very expensive treatment at first, but the people who are more interested in it are going to be willing to pay the higher cost. And over time, as the technology develops, it will also tend to become more affordable. Just like smartphones, for instance, used to be these large, bulky, quite expensive contraptions that were only available to millionaires and billionaires. But the old cell phones of, say, the 1980s or the 1990s didn't do very much, whereas the mobile phones of today, the smartphones of today, allow much of the world's information to be at the fingertips of even a comparatively quite poor person, like a subsistence farmer in sub-Saharan Africa. So in many ways, the arrival of a lot of today's technologies has helped to reduce certain kinds of inequality or certain kinds of lack of access, particularly in the realm of information. So what do you think about this issue of inequality? Do you think that the emerging technologies of the transhuman era would indeed increase inequality, or on the contrary, improve people's access to healthcare, information, material prosperity, and thus elevate even the poorest people of the world?
Mm-hmm. So I always start off from medical care, not like to be able to buy iPhone, because as we saw in the COVID situation, there were inequality between the people. Some people, Union European countries could and Americans could have access immediately to vaccination. This is what we saw in 2 years. Then it was very surprising for me that the one maker of vaccination who didn't work very well, French government gave it all to African countries, saying that they must be vaccinated. But in France, there were many victims of this vaccination. So this is the inequality of access to healthcare. So if we add the access of technology to this basic situation of access of healthcare, that will be more serious. This is what I think. And as I told about the reservation of vaccination for elderly people, if we don't have access to digital technology, we really cannot do anything. In France, when we become sick, we have to search on the internet the doctors, and we make reservation by telephone. So it's the beginning of digitalization of healthcare. And transhumanism is a situation in very advanced form. So this is why I think that when it becomes the percentage of intervention of technology becomes more huge, this inequality becomes more serious too. This is why I thought the inequality will be worse.
Yes, thank you, Makiko, for your answer. Certainly, it is a very interesting perspective and worthwhile to consider. Now, one aspect of your presentation that I found intriguing was your comment that perhaps robotics would be the bridge to wider adoption of transhumanism in Japan because of the extent of the adoption of robotic technologies in Japan already. I wish the rest of the world were as advanced in terms of various kinds of robots to take care of the elderly, robots to serve people at restaurants. We have a shortage of staff in the United States in restaurants right now. And as a result, often customers have to wait for a long time to get their food. And it would be nice if more robots could be brought in to address this situation. But Didier has a question for you, Makiko, with regard to transhumanism and robotics. So Didier, please go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, Makiko, I was interested when you said, okay, on one side, Japanese people are more open to robotics, to transhumanism, and on the other side, they are afraid. I wonder, maybe it's because Japanese people, but also more largely people in Asia, they do accept robots, even intelligent robots, even maybe robots who have kind of an inner life, who are conscious, but Japanese people, at least, they don't want to, let's say, to mix artificial intelligence and human intelligence, and they don't want to become cyborgs also, for example. It could that be the reason? So people, in very short, people accept to be helped by robots, but people don't want to be mixed with artificial intelligence.
Yes, maybe you are right. I wonder why they don't want to explain to me why they don't want to be, they don't want transhumanism in Japan.
Okay,
They really don't want to talk about it like a taboo.
strange. Okay, you
Because in
know,
France, I talk about it with everyone. Everyone is very excited about my thesis. So
I'm
yeah,
curious what they think about humanism. Is it? So I'm wondering if it's a religious thing, or maybe is it the prefix, the word trans? Is humanism common in Japan? I mean, probably not, right?
I don't know. Sorry, it's very difficult. Yeah, maybe they are afraid to be mixed with artificial intelligence because robot is robot. As I told, robot comes from machine, but transhumanist is human, which will enhance.
So perhaps the fear or reservation that people in Japan may have is a kind of merging of humans with machines. They're fine with machines being separate from humans and being developed and even being autonomous entities like robots could be and increasingly will become. So I'm curious, and this is perhaps a bit speculative, but if in the future an android type of entity were developed, like a humanoid robot that was fully autonomous and could interact almost indistinguishably from a human, but this entity would not be human. This entity would look human, kind of, sort of human, and would have a similar sophisticated degree of interactions, but there would be no biology and humans would remain biological humans. Do you think a lot of people in Japan would be comfortable with that situation, or would they still have reservations about it?
Now I got an idea about Japanese people's character, that, as I mentioned, they don't want immigration. We are very racist. Japanese are very racist. Maybe this kind of fear to be mixed with something else and ourselves is the reason why we don't want to become another thing.
Very
because
interesting.
when I show my daughter who is mixed with French and Japanese, they react very differently to a Japanese genuine child compared to here in France. So maybe this particularity of culture, refugees even think of transhumanism. Maybe this is what I thought just now as an idea.
Yes, this is a very interesting hypothesis, and there could be several hypotheses to explain the phenomena that you observed. Art Ramon has another hypothesis that he would like to share, so please go ahead.
Yeah, I think the fear is because of race. A lot of people dance around the racist issue, and I think, from my observation, there might be a lot of national shame because of the defeat in World War II, and you see a lot of Asian people who would get their eyes changed with an operation to look more Western. You see in a lot of anime cartoons, the characters who are supposed to be Asian look all white. They all look Western. They have blonde hair. And I think once transhumanism gets to a point where it's going to be easy to get some sort of phenotype genetic therapy, I think you might have just a whole swath of Japanese people who are just going to become, blue-eyed, blonde-haired Nordics. And that's going to profoundly change Japan. And that's going to sort of dance around the issue of morphological freedom. Are you going to be allowed to have your designer baby who is going to be a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Nordic, or is the government going to make a law against it? So I think race is the problem. I think when you have the ability to change your race and the technology is there, I think people are going to do it. And maybe in 100 years, there won't be any more Japanese phenotype people. They're going to be extinct. They'll be like the Ainu people, the indigenous people of Japan. They'll be a very tiny majority. And in 100 years, everyone in Japan is going to be a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Nordic. So that's my hypothesis.
Interesting. Or there could be thousands of different phenotypes, so people could choose, if they could choose any aspect of themselves that is genetically feasible, they could choose some combinations that don't exist today.
I'm not so sure everybody's going to want to be Nordic blonde, I mean, I could see a lot of, Westerners wanting to be Japanese,
There are a lot of Westerners who want to be Japanese.
It's really going to throw
Yes, exactly. Everyone's going to want to change their race.
It's going to be a whole new ballgame.
So Didier has a question as well.
Yes, Makiko, so thank you once again for the work you were doing for HEALS. And one of the things who were surprising to me is that when you said that Yamamaka is kind of a celebrity in Japan, no, not a kind of, it's really a celebrity in Japan. But do you know why, or maybe the question is, are there Japanese authorities, Japanese organizations really working on projects related to the Yamanaka factor, so for rejuvenation? I think no. And if I think correctly, why not actually? Do you have an idea? Is it a lack of money or is it for another reason? Because, of course, the Yamanaka factors are potentially very important for rejuvenation. And since the Japanese population is one of the most aging populations in the world, yeah, potentially it's very important, of course, and also especially like you said, in a country where population is reluctant to have, let's say, young people coming from other countries.
I didn't get the meaning. Why Yamanaka is not so...
No, so Yamanaka is very popular. It's clear, you told me that. But why is nobody, as far as I know, in Japan, trying to make, let's say, concrete applications of this work to rejuvenate people? Of course, first to rejuvenate mice, but trying to use these methods. The people working with Yamanaka are people outside of Japan, as far as I know.
I found that he's working for one of important, I don't know exactly, but the reason why Yamanaka has participated to Altos Labs is, as my opinion, it was very political reason, because it's a company of America. And when there were promotion about vaccination of COVID, Yamanaka came to media to talk about the safety of vaccination, which are from American pharmacy companies. Then they opened an official site to promote how Pfizer vaccine, Pfizer, Moderna, safe, how they are safe. Then people changed mind and decided to take this vaccination. So what I thought is that it's not that his invention for longevity is evaluated by Japanese government, but he is just used for political reasons. This because the Japanese government cannot say no for American interests, economical interests. This is why I thought that it's kind of strategy that he participated in Altos Labs, and it's separate. The Japanese people do not know about it. They just think that he is kind of professor like a god because he got Nobel Prize, and he promoted this vaccination to save Japanese population. So most of Japanese population doesn't have impression that his activity is connected to realization of transhumanism.
So it seems perhaps that they respect him because he is an accomplished scientist and he earned the Nobel Prize and he essentially contributes to the stature, the prestige of Japanese society, but they don't focus as much on the transhumanist implications of his work. Very interesting. Now, Jose Cordero has a question. Please go ahead.
Yes, please. And I lived 3 years in Tokyo, I was between 2006 and 2009 in Tokyo, and I visited Dr. Shinya Yamanaka in 2008 at Kyoto University. He still didn't have the Nobel Prize yet because he got the Nobel Prize in 2012. But I knew that his discovery was absolutely amazing. It was incredible, and it would change almost everything, certainly concerning longevity. For what I have seen, actually, his team in Kyoto are working on rejuvenation treatments for the eyes. This is the first organ that we already know. We can rejuvenate the eyes of mice, and we are now seeing how we will soon rejuvenate the eyes of people. And I think we will have these treatments in 1 or 2 years in Japan. As you probably know, David Sinclair and his team at Harvard University are also working on this. After they have been successful with mice, they are approaching human trials. But Japan has an advantage over the USA or Europe because it is allowing people of high age, older people, to experiment with new treatments. And the FDA and the regulations in Europe are horrible. So nothing can be tried even in older people or in people in terminal condition until it has been approved. So I think there is a big legal change that is starting in Japan precisely because people are aging very fast. And if we have some treatments that can be used to reverse blindness in humans, in old humans, they will do it. So have you followed any of this interesting discussion in Japan in terms of eye treatments and changing laws, making them more flexible for treatments for older people, please?
This is the first time that I heard about it, and it's very interesting. Maybe I have to research about it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Makiko, and thank you, Jose, for your question. Now, our friend Sergei Gubkin has an interesting comment and question. He wonders, is there a fear in Japanese society of completely abandoning traditional Japanese beliefs, and could that be what stalls the discussion about transhumanism? He writes, the Japanese have modernized, but he wonders if they de-emphasize the traditional Japanese religions rather than completely abandoning those religious beliefs. And if that plays a role, is there any potential conflict or tension between traditional Japanese religious beliefs and transhumanism? Or would you say there's more compatibility there than might appear at first glance?
So the question is if the traditional thought prevent from the new way of thinking?
Yes, if the traditional religious or philosophical systems in Japan have any sort of conflict or tension with transhumanism.
I don't think that is from traditional religious beliefs, because we have broken this kind of traditional way of thinking in our generation. We are familiar with Western countries, cultures, and we are losing the beautiful point of the traditional way of thinking. I wonder if it's connected to our cultural, traditional way of thinking. I'm really interested in why they don't want to accept it. Tonight, I think I'm very interested in, and I will try to ask the people who changed the topics to talk about it.
This
maybe,
could be
yeah,
another focus of your research, because
yeah.
it could be a sociologically fascinating question to consider. But please continue.
No, just I'd like to ask again to the people who changed the topics to know about it. And maybe they do not exactly what it is too. Because I didn't know either before second year of my master. My professor in Paris is very fascinated, and with her homework, when I chose this topic, she was very happy. So, and when I started to study about it, I thought that would be very interesting to continue. So maybe they really don't know. It's only like in the American film of the 80s or 70s.
Yes, indeed. And I think in many cases, even in Western societies, one of the greatest obstacles to the adoption of transhumanism is not hostility, it's unawareness. Even in many of my conversations today with essentially ordinary people in the United States, when I mention transhumanism, it's not that they have any preconceived ideas about it. It's that they don't know what the term means. They haven't encountered it before. So I have to explain it to them. And then the reactions will vary based on the explanation that I provide. But I would say about 50% of the reactions that I receive in the United States are at least mildly positive, and about 50% of the reactions are mildly skeptical. So it would be interesting if, when you talk to Japanese people about transhumanism, you might preface it with a definition of transhumanism and try to connect it to the technologies they're familiar with robotics or emerging medical advances, and then see what they think about it, and then see if they're receptive to it. But this is just a suggestion of how that topic might be approached with people who might not be familiar with it initially. Now I would like to give Ben Ballweg the opportunity to ask a question. Please go ahead.
You just got me thinking about Okinawans. Makiko, are you aware that Okinawa has some of the longest lives on the planet? They are studied for their blue zone. I don't know if I like the direction of this question. I'm trying to think of might Okinawans really be interested in this technology more than Japanese, because Okinawans are already kind of like on top and they want to maintain their place as the longest lived
living very long time. Sorry.
I don't know if Okinawans would, if Okinawa would be more receptive to transhumanism than even mainland Japan.
I have never heard of it.
No. Right.
But just like for example, in Italy, the people in Sardinia live very long. The common situation between Okinawa is that they eat well, there is sunshine, and Okinawan people love to dance and sing a song. Really, this works very well for longevity. It's not money, because Okinawa is the poorest region in Japan. This is very amazing too, because we think that if we want health and longevity, we might think that we need money and healthcare. But basically, they are in the good condition because of because of this condition. This is what I thought simply about Okinawan people. Even in Japan, it's very known that Okinawa people live so long. And I'm not sure if they are particularly interested in transhumanism.
Just to qualify these things about like Okinawa and was it Sardinia or Sicily having some of the longest stats? I know maybe a few months back we had a salon and there was a comment about maybe there being some skepticism of these longevity stats. Just if they figured that the science wasn't being done right or something. I forget. Do you remember that, Gennady?
This was from our virtual Enlightenment Salon with Dr. Bill Andrews, who's a good friend of mine. And he seems to think that some of the so-called blue zones are statistical anomalies, that they're specific to a certain generation, like the generation of people who were studied in Okinawa and reported to have extraordinary longevity. They were a single generation and their children don't live as long. So it is an interesting question, but I'm curious what Makiko has to say about that. Makiko, do you think that the so-called blue zones are a genuine phenomenon or a statistical anomaly?
In Okinawa?
In Okinawa and in other places as well, where above average life expectancies are observed and people have tied it to lifestyle, do you really think it is a matter of lifestyle, or is it more of a matter of chance, like this particular group of people happens to have lived longer than average, but it may be largely random? What do you think on that question?
I think it's random. It's not. There is no people from Okinawa. I don't know how to answer it. It's random. It's not so. It's so paradoxical because we think that we try to put money to stay healthier, but they are living very simply and they can live so long time. They have less stress compared to big citizens.
So it could be that a lower stress lifestyle is conducive to greater longevity. And that's an interesting hypothesis. It's definitely one that I'm sympathetic to. And Didier, do you have some thoughts on this?
Yes, maybe I won't be. I have many thoughts on this, but one aspect is I know some people say that probably first that the first way to one of the elements is that there are people exaggerating their age, and in countries or in regions where the statistical information is not good, you have kind of let's say false information, you know. That's one aspect, and you have to be especially careful in countries or in regions where you see many male people who seem to be becoming older. That's one aspect. The second aspect, and probably the most important one, is for Okinawa, but also for some regions in Italy. So it is places where people have a good social life, have a not stressful social life, and also have activities and don't eat too much. So these are good aspects for a longer life. Third thing that I want to say, and this is for me very important, is to say, okay, even if there is a difference, it's not such a big difference. It's only 2-3 years difference between the average in one region and the average in another country. Then last aspect, no, two more aspects. One aspect is in Okinawa. It seems that the life expectancy was higher before, but now it's coming like the average Japanese person. So it's still high, but not higher than in the rest of Japan. And the last aspect, it could be also for some regions, especially islands, that there is a genetic component. It's well known that in the islands you have a very specific population, well, because they cannot escape, they cannot exchange. So it can be that by chance the genetic aspects are better than in other countries. That's what I wanted to say. I will.
Yes, thank you, Didier. I believe you're on mute.
Sorry, no, since long or just the last seconds?
About the last 30 seconds.
Okay. Sorry. So just to finish, I agree to something that I found. In Okinawa, it seems that now Okinawan people don't live as long as before. So they live like average Japanese. So it was the first of the 47 prefectures in 1980, but now it is the 26th in 2000. It is the 26th in 2000s, and it is still this, so halfway.
Yes,
That's
and
it.
this is what Bill Andrews was referring to in our virtual Enlightenment Salon, which is linked here. We had an excellent 3-hour conversation with him on October 10th, 2021. So please, if you have not seen that, check it out. It is definitely a wealth of information. Our friend Alan Crowley, who also was quite generous today with his super chat, writes, surely there are a mix of genetic and lifestyle factors, but since we at this point cannot change our genetics, the blue zone, for example, focuses on lifestyle. And it's interesting to consider to what extent lifestyle makes a difference. There are certainly various perspectives on this, and perhaps lifestyle can prolong life for a certain number of years, possibly a decade or so, and avoiding unhealthy practices can prevent one from dying before reaching the average life expectancy for one's society. So I would certainly encourage people to avoid unhealthy habits, avoid taking needless risks, physical risks, as well as perhaps the kinds of emotional risks that lead to greater stress. However, without advances in biotechnology, without the next generation of medical treatments, without genetic engineering and the ability to repair and reverse the damages of aging, we unfortunately are still faced with fairly severe limitations on our lifespans. Even the healthiest supercentenarians today are not able to live beyond 122 years, and no person besides Jean Calment has been able to live past 120 years. So I hope to see that situation overcome. And we had a great salon with Didier recently about the decline in life expectancy observed over the past 2 years, 2020 and 2021, and how we might hopefully reverse that decline in the coming years. Now, I would like to ask Makiko, since we have only about 5 minutes remaining in our salon, to provide some closing comments, because we have discussed a wide array of issues today, and you've certainly offered some excellent insights from your research, as well as directions that you would like to explore in the future. So could you perhaps tell us what some of your plans are and what input you would like from the transhumanist and longevity communities that would help you make further progress.
Why I came here today?
Yes.
Okay. To continue to study in my PhD, I need a funding from a company. And I chose American companies because, as I explained, GAFAM is very concerned in transhumanism, and America is where transhumanism is born. So Japan is very concerned with America politically and economically, everything, and European Union as well. So I came to explain about my project here because I'd like to have maybe if there are recommendations about American biotechnology in reproduction healthcare. I'd like to have those informations because I'd like to apply for this opportunity. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Makiko. And I hope that this virtual Enlightenment Salon and the recording of it, which will be available afterward, will be of interest to various individuals within our community who are connected to the kinds of companies or institutions who would be able to support your research. And I would say the possibilities here would not just be limited to a private for-profit organization, but also certain grants, like research grants, might be available. And I wanted to open this up to a general audience in case anybody has ideas about specific directions that Makiko could explore. So anybody who has these kinds of ideas, even after our live stream, please feel free to mention them in the YouTube comments or contact Makiko via the email address that she provided or connect with her on LinkedIn. All of these are possibilities. And now I know Jason had one question that is interesting, and I think we could address it during our remaining time. He wonders if you've heard of the game Deus Ex. It's a video game, computer game series, and it explores questions of transhumanism and human enhancement. Do you know if it's popular in Japan?
I don't know. Maybe I can search on the internet. And is it popular in Japan? Is it from Japan?
It's not from Japan. It is a Western game, but it explores transhumanist themes. Jason, go ahead.
Well, you probably know the game better than me, but yeah, it has transhumanism in it, and I think like the hero or something is transhumanist. And actually, I heard there was another game that came out where the transhumanists were the bad guys, so I don't know how it's gonna go.
Well, it is a game that I have played.
Can someone write down the name of the game, please?
Yeah, yes. I don't even know if I spelled it right in the chat there.
So this is the name of the series,
okay.
Deus Ex, but there are various games within that series that I think would be of interest to anybody who studies transhumanism, because a lot of the story elements and a lot of the philosophical dilemmas that the character experiences within the game are very much along the lines of the conversations that we have been having today. So this may be another aspect for you to consider in your research in terms of the societal reception of transhumanism. And you may want to see if any of your Japanese acquaintances have played this game or just encountered it, because I know there is a vibrant culture of video and computer game playing in
I saw
Japan.
that they sell in Japan too,
Mhm.
from 2001.
Didn't we have a big salon about that too, where one of our guests was talking about that game a lot? I don't remember.
Yes.
It was a long time ago.
Yes, our friend Francesco Neo Amati was discussing Deus Ex, and he is quite a fan. Well,
Yeah,
thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you, Makiko, for your fascinating insights. Thank you to our USTP officers and Didier and Jose and our engaged audience on YouTube. I hope you all live long and prosper.
Good